Welcome to the Chief of Cybersecurity podcast, where we discuss relevant information concerning the cybersecurity workforce, business development, and best practices, made possible by CMIS. Learn more at cmis.net. And for a list of authorized publications, visit DewayneHart.com. And now, here's your host, Dewayne Hart.
Welcome to another episode of the Chief of Cybersecurity podcast session. You know, one of the core elements for cybersecurity is to reduce risk. If you talk to any cybersecurity professional, they will tell you that that's probably one of the most challenging part of working in the cybersecurity industry, because risks are always active and alive. Trying to draft these reports and to show upper management that you are putting efforts toward reducing risk can be kind of challenging. I myself have been working in cybersecurity for a bit, and I tell you that this is one of the most challenging areas. And, you know, the reason that it's so challenging is that because sometimes they fail. So that's the title of this podcast session: Security, Compliance, and Risk Management. Why are they failing? And there's a reason why they are failing. And I am going to go over some areas that are going to focus on some of the challenges, some of the drawbacks, and some of the solutions, and some of the best practices that organization can use to ensure that security, compliance, and risk management is successful. So let's talk about the goals and outcome of the show. I am also going to start off by giving a practical definition of security, compliance, and risk management. So that's straightforward. All right. Operational use of it as well too. What is the operational use of the security, compliance, and risk management? All right. And I am going to talk about some of the key points to consider. What are the key points that needs to be discussed? Okay. And I'm going to roll into some of the security frameworks that are used. There are some security frameworks that are used for security, compliance, and risk management. And these are the standards that have to be followed, whether you are on the commercial side or whether you are working for the government. And then I'm going to come up with a problem statement. And that problem statement is, why do we fail? Okay. Why do we fail when it comes to security, compliance, and risk management? And then after that, I'm going to give some solutions out, because I cannot leave here without giving solutions. So what is security, compliance, and risk management? If you think about a standard, when you're working for a company, and there are certain standards that need to be followed, and those standards are driven out in policies. And what happens is that every so often, those standards have to be checked. So if you relate everything to the security, compliance, and risk management domain, it follows the same concept. Organizations have to remain compliant when it comes to cybersecurity. So compliance refers to the act of conforming to a set of standards, regulations, or requirements. In general, compliance is a business initiative, okay? And there are two areas that your compliance focus on. You know, there are regulatory compliance and there are corporate type of compliance. Regulatory is like your laws, like the regulations and the guidelines. Well, the corporate compliance is those internal policies. If you think about cybersecurity, there is a government standard that the nation has to follow. And if you work for a company such as Bank of America, then Bank of America has their own type of compliance laws that must be in place. Something else to think about: compliant is centered around the requirements of a third party. Okay, yes. Because there are industry regulation, there are government policies, there are security frameworks, and client, customer, contractual terms. All right. Because when you write a contract with an organization, you and that organization has to has to come up with a certain type of agreement. And you usually put that down on paper. And that is a compliance law. And if you work in IT, if you've done an audit before, there are type of compliance laws that have to be in place, because these compliance laws are built to make sure that security operates. Because from company A to company B, company A wants to make sure that company B is compliant to certain laws and regulations and policies, because company B has their data. All right. And if company B do not follow those standards, then that's where risk occurs. All right. Something else is IT compliance can apply in domains other than IT. All right. I've already talked about contracts, regulation, external requirements such as HIPAA. HIPAA is designated for the healthcare industry, and organizations have to comply to HIPAA standards as well. All right. And something else is that under this compliance, we have risk management. Now, risk is a very simple term. It's the process of identifying assets and managing potential threats and vulnerabilities. All right. Because if you notice that the term for risk management, it states that you have to identify assets and manage. All right. It is nothing stated in the definition that you come up with answers, and that you have a full solution in place that removes risk. Risk can never be removed. Okay. Because what you're going to learn later on in this podcast session is that compliance operates at a certain level. All right. Let's say, for instance, if you had 100 checks that you have to get done for a risk assessment program, if you score an 85, and if the benchmark is set at 85, then your organization is compliant. But you know what? There's a 15% risk factor that you got to worry about. And this is where risk comes to play a key role. And one of the key problems is that, certain organizations base cybersecurity on compliance versus risk. But later on, we're going to dive more into this, as I also want to transition over here to some key points to consider. Compliance is the association with established industry regulation ensures organizations stay protected from unique risks. That's straightforward. Risk management helps protect organizations from risks that could lead to non-compliance, which is a risk in itself. All right, so you see the relationship is building. Compliance is often seen as a starting point for security, while risk can take on continuous improvement. Yes, because if you think about this, all right, continuous improvement, because you're trying to make things better, because you complied, but you met that benchmark at 85%, but you have a 15% factor now that you have to deal with. This is where that continuous improvement comes to play into surface. Risk activities are often tied to process. Compliance is connected to a set of requirements. Yes. Think about that. Compliance goes in relationship to all these laws and regulations that you have to follow. All right. So what happens is that you have to comply to all these regulational standards. And one of those is something called like the statistics, right? For like my friends and fellow members out there that are listening, if you have worked within the government space, there is something called statistics, which are some benchmark checks. So you have those set up for Windows assets. You have it set up for databases, and you have them set up for maybe for routers and switches. And there are certain settings that should exist amongst all those different type of checks. And if they don't exist, then what happens is that your life become a nightmare. So which means that the government states, okay, we want these compliance standards to be in place. If you work in corporate America, I'm pretty sure there are compliance standards that you have to follow as well too. And there's plenty of those on the planet out there. And I'm going to talk about some of those as we continue to go through this podcast session. Now the most important thing to remember here is that security, compliance, and risk management is at the core of cybersecurity. If security, compliance, and risk management fail, cybersecurity will fail in itself, because there are three elements that make up risk. All right, and it's called threats and vulnerabilities, right? And it's risk itself. All right. So when you think about risk, these are the elements that make up risk. If they fail, cybersecurity fail. And also your compliance initiative will probably fail as well too. Because if you fail risk, then, well, you're not compliant. Now you see how all of these work? So let's talk about some of these security frameworks and compliance standards. You have FISMA. FISMA is a government standard that stands for Federal Information Security Management Act. This is where the government has to do these audits every year on their system to make sure that those systems are compliant. You know, there are certain checks that are done just to make sure that access control standards are in place, which is what the government call your account management policies, right? Some of the other checks too is to go and verify that certain systems are like isolated. And I speak of isolated is because there are systems that are publicly accessible, but you know what? Those systems should not provide access to the non-public type of domains that the government has. So FISMA has a set of controls to follow. Some of those are your configuration management, and as I said before, access control. Let's see, now you have privacy, you have risk assessment, and all of those are checked. But if a government agency fails, then it becomes a problem. ISO 27001 is an industry standard. It is close to the government standard as well too. Some of the same checks that you do internally with the government are those same checks that you would follow with ISO 27001. PCI DSS is for the payment card industry. All right. Those are type of checks that happen as well. RMF, which stands for the Risk Management Framework. Every person that has done work with the federal government has used the NIST RMF standard. Okay. What the RMF does is it gives you what I would call a standard to follow, so that organizational risk management practices can be put in place, assessed, and making sure that they comply to the government standard. Okay. One of the terms that fall under RMF is called your security accreditation. All right, because systems have to be accredited. Before any system is put on a network, that system has to go through a compliance standard. So that means that if there's a brand new laptop, right, and if that laptop has to be networked on a government system, the first thing happening is that there is a compliance check done, which is this or sticks, to go and check and make sure that certain registry settings are set, to also make sure that the firewall settings are put in a certain parameter. All of those checks have to get done, right? And then after those checks are done, that's when the RMF piece comes to play a practice, because that laptop has to get accredited, all right? So the government has a standard that they follow, and corporate America has a standard to follow. But digital sticks is out there as well too, and for the corporate industry, there's something called the CIS benchmarks. All right, and a lot of these checks you can run through a compliant checking tool. If you have applications, such as Tenable Nexus, if you're using something like CrowdStrike Falcon, if you're using something like IBM Web Inspect, or some of those type of applications that can scan an environment, they will give you information or pretty much results based upon whether you're compliant or not. Okay, and something else is too is for software. There's one called Fortify. Fortify is one that is used as well. All right, and all of these are used by your security folks. So let's talk about something else. Why do we fail? Okay, here's something to go and think about here. Security not a pre-thought. Okay, this is one reason why we fail, and it's not integrated into the SDLC. The system development lifecycle, because before you bring a system online, it has to go through the SDLC process. It is a developmental process to make sure that that system is safe. And sometimes some organizations don't even think about security. All right. Risk, ignorance. All right. People will ignore risk. They don't think it's important until something happens. One of the other factors is risk-based thinking. All right. Organizations stay at that 85%. What about that 15% factor? And this is where the cybersecurity mindset comes into play here. Because when the cybersecurity mindset comes into play, right, you can extend compliance. And pretty much when you extend compliance, right, there is something called responsible actions and ownership takes place. Somebody has to take ownership for risk. You cannot pass it along. One of the greatest features that come out of a risk assessment is that there are opportunities. Most organizations or people may just think, okay, if I find a risk, then it makes me look really bad. I don't think I need to say anything about it. It's nothing wrong about finding a risk, because if you don't know where you're at, well, you don't know where to go. Think about this. If an organization was to think that they're 100% safe and they never ever saw any risk, then are they more vulnerable than an organization that find risk and they are working on risk? Think. The organization that have found risk are probably going to be a lot more safe. All right. Opportunities exist when you find risk. All right. Here goes some other reason why we fail. Measurement of known risk. People don't measure risk appropriately. All right. Failure to take risk into account. Hey, organizations, people say, I don't care about risk. This is where the cybersecurity mindset comes to play into existence, and this is where the cybersecurity mindset brings into existence the inclusive culture. It's having people to actually have a buy-in process. Failure to communicate risks to top management. See, now, this is important. This goes back to, I don't think I want the CISO to know that we're having this issue. You have to be openly, honestly speak about it. All right? Failure to monitor risk. This is part of continuous monitoring. You have to monitor risk. You have to keep your eyes open, and you have to be vigilant. This is where situational awareness comes to surface. Okay? Something else. Failure to appropriately apply risk metrics. You have to apply your risk metrics appropriately. You have to have a measurement system in place where you have numbers that are accurate and the numbers represent the enterprise. Because if you try to gauge these numbers and to push these numbers around so that everything can go in the green, that may be a problem. Oh, going in the green. Okay, here's something that's very important. Going in the green means that when you send up a report, there are green, yellow, and red dots on that report. The red means bad, and the yellow means that, hey, well, it's not so bad, well, it's a very low risk. All right. And the green means that we're good to go. A lot of upper management people like to see green. And then you have lower individuals that work in cybersecurity that are forced to go in the green, and they will change these reports to go in the green. But you know what? Risks are still there, because you just took a report and changed it around to go make management happy. But your organization is still vulnerable. This is one of the reasons why security compliance and risk management is failing. Okay, accurate data. Okay, so I'm going to give you some solutions that's probably going to help out. And I say probably because certain organizations do not onboard every solution. But let's just talk about a couple of these. Build security early, not late. So that means that as soon as you bring a system online, that's when you integrate security. Have a buy-in structure. That means sell that pitch to your organization that risk management is very important. Do not combine security compliance and risk management. They are totally separate. All right, they are totally separate. When you do a compliance check, you do a compliance check. When you do a risk assessment, you do a risk assessment. All right. Follow best practices. There are plenty of guides out there on the planet that would give you best practices that tell you how to carry out a risk management program. The NIST has one. You can think of SANS has one. There's so many other standards out there on the internet, that can help you out because honestly, when security compliance and risk management fail, a corporation also fails their customers. Okay, because your customer's thinking, can I trust that organization anymore? Because I heard about their audit. Something else, accurate reporting. Data quality management. Data quality management means that before you send that report up, take a look at it. All right, see what is right. This is where your situation awareness rises in. If you're at a top level management, when you receive a report, do your data quality management. Okay, because you may have to take that report and to share it with your, customers. Maybe there's an SLA written that states every time you have an audit, your customers want to see your audit because they want to maintain trust with you that you are protecting their data. And if you send up the wrong report, it could be bad for your company. So data quality management is very important. Update your benchmarks. Benchmarks come out, plugins come out, because plugins are used for these active applications that scan the environment and look for vulnerabilities and risks. If you don't update those, they're going to give you some bad data and gouts. Think about Microsoft Patch Tuesdays. Microsoft Patch Tuesdays comes out, and if you have the wrong plugin installed, you're going to be scanning for issues that happened a month ago. All right. And you may go to your CISO and say, hey, we don't have any vulnerability for Microsoft this month. Well, you know what? You didn't go update the plugin because you have to do that. Testing is not new. Start early. All right. When we have these assessments, right, an audit or an assessment is an evaluation of what was supposed to be happening. All right. So that means that you should not be running in an emergency mode. You should not be trying to jump over a fence to go get ready for these assessments. If you have a continuous involvement into the cybersecurity workforce, and if you have a continuous involvement into following best practices, all those assessments should be easy. All right. But the problem is that people only want to get involved with these assessments and the testing when it's warranted. You should always be in that test mode. This is part of the cybersecurity mindset. Stay proactive versus reactive. Yeah, if you're proactive, then you're going to be starting early. You're not going to wait until something happens and say that we need to take a better handle on risk. No, you're going to remain vigilant. You're going to have your eyes open. And you want to be a part of this security compliance and risk management initiatives. All right. Practice standards. Standards are written for a particular reason, okay? Rules are written for a particular reason. Follow them. It makes your life easy. Let's just give this a thought. If you did not follow the standards, and if you tried to put everything in the green, right? Imagine how much cover-up that you have to do. All right? Bear with me for a second. Now, imagine that you followed the standards, right? And you accurately gave a report that represented red, yellow, and green. And also, too, you had a justification behind that. Now what you've done is that you have installed confidence from the top level management. And this is what the inclusive culture is all about, is having that buy-in process. And now what you have done is that you have went out there and provide opportunity to go clean up risk. So in summary, security compliant and risk managed operates in unison. All right. Make sure that you practice them appropriately. And I'm going to keep stating this over and over again. The inclusive culture is very important. Stay proactive. Do not get involved when you think it's appropriate. Look at some of the key points on why organizations fail. They fail because nobody's acting. Nobody wants to be involved with this program until something happens. Continuous monitoring is very important because continuous monitoring is ongoing observation, involvement into cybersecurity. This is where the cybersecurity mindset comes to surface, all right? Something else to keep in mind, extend the compliance mentality. 85% is really good, but you know what? That 15% factor you have to worry about because there may be a Trojan horse, a ransomware, or something else in that 15%. Because a lot of people reach the 85% and, they clap their hands and they stop working. No, you can't stop working. You have to continuously stay involved, all right? Think about the cybersecurity DNA because security compliance and risk management is part of the cybersecurity DNA. What is it that we know about the cybersecurity DNA? It is a set of building blocks. And if you push down one of those blocks, then you destroy the cybersecurity DNA. If you destroy the cybersecurity DNA, well, guess what? You destroy cybersecurity. What is it that we know about risk? Risk has two factors, okay? Threats and vulnerabilities. Vulnerabilities are those loopholes that actually occur in a system, okay? And so we try to reduce vulnerabilities to the lowest level. But some of those vulnerability management programs do not work effectively. Trust me. I've been out on the industry for a while. There are problems with some vulnerability management programs. So in episode 6, what's wrong with your vulnerability management program? We are going to be discussing those topics. See you in episode 6.
You've been listening to the Chief of Cybersecurity podcast, where you have gained relevant knowledge to enhance your cybersecurity mindset. Be sure to visit DewayneHart.com to learn more about authored publications, show notes, and discover more information concerning cybersecurity.